Good evening. Welcome to my late night spook show, Creature Feature, Shockathon, Scarorama, and Screamo-Vision. I'm Hellhound, and welcome back to the Horror Metal channel. I've been meaning to do a video on the Universal Classic Monsters for quite some time now. I wasn't sure how to go about it. I thought about reviewing each of them individually, which I probably will at some point, for sure, but I wasn't sure what order to go in, because I kind of want to review all the Frankenstein movies in order, but since some of the later ones are crossovers, I don't really want to review, like, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, and all that, if I haven't reviewed the Wolfman and Dracula yet, so, but I'll get to it eventually. I'll probably just review them all, like, in the order they came out, which is probably the best way to go about it. I've even thought about doing a top 10 list, my top 10 favorite Universal Classic Monsters films, and I'll probably do that eventually. Now, people often ask me what the first horror film I ever saw was, and the thing is, I definitely started with the Universal Classic Monsters, the old black and white Universal films from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, even some of the silent films of the 20s, I think, should definitely count. I've always loved scary things. I've always loved ghost stories and Halloween and stuff, so I think I would have been a horror fan anyway. I love haunted houses and cemeteries. I think I definitely would have got into the horror movies regardless, but the Universal Classic Monsters is where it all started. I watched those movies religiously growing up, and they definitely, my love of horror cinema definitely originated there, and it probably accelerated the process of me becoming an avid horror fanatic. So anyway, yeah, there's a big part of my life. I love these movies. I'm not going to spend too much time. Like, I'm not really going to give a brief review or summary of each of them. This is just going to be my collection, all the ones I own on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, even Betamax. So yeah, I'm just going to go through my collection real quick, because that way I can kind of talk about all the movies a little bit, So anyway, okay, with that out of the way, let's go and get started. So the first one in my collection, let's start with Betamax, and the only one I have on Beta is the original Frankenstein from 1931, directed by James Whale. This is probably the one that started it all for me. I did probably see Dracula, the 1931 classic with Bela Lugosi first, and I loved it, but I think it's the Frankenstein movies that really got me into horror, and that was my first collection. My first ever franchise that I collected were the Frankenstein films on VHS. I had just about all the Universal horror movies on VHS growing up. I had that was the first one that I seriously collected way before I got into Jason and Freddy and all that. They had most of them. Most of them weren't even a huge franchise like they are now yet. So yeah, the Universal Classic Monsters was like one of the first things I was an avid fan of, and yeah, this is the only one I have on Beta today. So yeah, the original Frankenstein, 1931, one of my only Betamax tapes left, and but one of the best, so yeah. Also, I'm only going to include, like, the actual classic monsters. You know which ones they are. I'm not going to talk about every single horror movie or monster movie that Universal's ever done, because I'll be here all day. So yeah, if you see them in this picture on my phone wallpaper, then I'm probably going to talk about them. They're probably going to be included on the list. So if I'll probably get some comments saying, why didn't you include, yada yada. It doesn't fit the criteria. It's only the Universal Classic Monsters. So yeah, Frankenstein on Betamax. First film that we in my collection. It's the only Beta I have from the Universal Classic Monsters. All right, next we'll look at VHS tapes. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because I think I already spent too much time on that. Of course, the original Dracula, Bela Lugosi. It's still one of the very best, very creepy, very atmospheric. Directed by Todd Browning. Yeah, great movie. Bela Lugosi is Dracula. He's the one who started. He's so iconic. He's the one that started the whole thing, Dracula being represented in pop culture now owes a lot to Bela Lugosi. Anybody who does impersonations, usually doing his Hungarian accent and having their hair slicked back and wearing the cape and stuff, this movie's probably remembered more, even more than the original Bram Stoker novel, which I also recommend. And it strays pretty far from the novel. It takes a lot of liberties. But anyway, yeah, Dracula, gotta love it. All right, I'm not going to give all these reviews because I'll be here all day. Sorry, I already said I wasn't going to do that, and I kind of did that anyway. All right, so yeah, next we have the original Frankenstein, which I already talked about, 1931, classic, directed by James Whale. Yeah, this is probably the one that started it all for me. Bride of Frankenstein, which is my favorite Universal Classic Monster movie of all time. This has always been my favorite. I love it so much. Elsa Lanchester plays the bride. She's not in it very much. Colin Clive returns as Dr. Henry Frankenstein, renamed from Victor from the novel. He's great. He's just awesome. But the best character is Ernest Thesiger as Dr. Pretorius. Great villain. Boris Karloff returns as Frankenstein's monster from this one, and he talks this time. He actually talks in this one. He has a lot of lines. Yeah, I love this movie. It's actually really entertaining. It's a blast, you know. Of course, it's kind of slow now compared to today's standard, but it's actually pretty amusing for, you know, a 1935 film. Yeah, my favorite Universal film. All right, so let's go through the rest of them kind of quickly. A lot of these are still in there. They're still wrapped, by the way. Yeah, here's Son of Frankenstein, the third and final Frankenstein film featuring Boris Karloff as the monster. Yeah, it's the third in the series. It features Basil Rathbone, most well known for playing Sherlock Holmes, as Dr. Frankenstein, Henry Frankenstein's son Wolf, who takes over the family business. And Bela Lugosi plays the villainous Igor, a man whose neck was broken from being hanged. He's not like the hunchbacked assistant that everybody thinks he is now. It's, you know, usually referenced in other parodies and stuff. But yeah, he's a great character. Yeah, Son of Frankenstein, really good one. It's the last time Boris Karloff played the monster, unfortunately. Ghost of Frankenstein, a pretty good sequel. This is kind of one of my least favorites, though, in the Frankenstein movies. I really like the ending, and there's a few things I like. You just want to have Ludwig Frankenstein, another son of the original doctor, played by Cedric Hardwicke, who also plays the ghost of the original Henry Frankenstein in a brief scene. Colin Clive sadly passed away before this came out, so he didn't reprise his role. And Lon Chaney Jr. plays the monster this time. He does an okay job. He's not quite as good as Boris Karloff. Yeah, Ghost of Frankenstein, the fourth film in the Universal Frankenstein series. Here we have Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, the first crossover. This time Bela Lugosi plays the monster, and Lon Chaney Jr. reprises his role as Lawrence Talbot as the Wolfman from The Wolfman, which we'll look at in a second. Yeah, really good movie. It's a crossover. Cool to see both monsters together, and it's very, very fun. Then we have House of Frankenstein. I love this movie. I know this time Glenn Strange plays the monster, and he would play the role in the next two films as well. This time we have Dracula, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein's monster. Dracula's played by John Carradine, who he's not nearly as good as Bela Lugosi, not even close, but he's not too bad. And Boris Karloff returns as an evil scientist, and he's probably my favorite character in the film, Dr. Neiman, and his hunchback assistant Daniel. The bad thing is, yeah, it features three monsters, but they don't really share any screen time. Dracula's killed off before the Wolfman and Frankenstein's monster are even introduced, and the Frankenstein's monster didn't come to life until after the Wolfman is already killed with a silver bullet. So, yeah, it's kind of disappointing. But still a pretty good movie. I like this a lot. I think this might be my third favorite in the Frankenstein series after the first two, after Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Yeah, very fun movie, very entertaining. And I love Boris Karloff in it. Then we have House of Dracula. This is probably the weakest. Yeah, Dracula's in it again. John Carradine, once again, unfortunately, is not Bela Lugosi. And the Wolfman. And a weird thing about this cover is it has Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Wolfman's human form, Lawrence Talbot, again played by Lon Chaney Jr. Glenn Strange plays the monster, and the main villain is Dr. Edelman. He's kind of a Jekyll Hyde type character. Yeah, it's not a terrible movie. It probably is my least favorite of all the Frankenstein films. And then finally, we have Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. I love this movie. It's hilarious. It's a blast. I love Abbott and Costello. They're just as good as Laurel and Hardy. I grew up watching a lot of their stuff, and I think it's a great idea to have them with the monsters. This has Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and Dracula, who's once again played by Bela Lugosi for the second and final time. He reprised his role from the original 17 years later. This came out in 1948. I'm really glad he returned because he was awesome. It's great seeing them all, and all three monsters are in it quite a lot. And they interact quite a bit. So this is everything I could have ever asked for in a monster rally. This is all three monsters, and they're in it quite a bit. And these two characters, Abbott and Costello, are hilarious. I love this movie. It's my favorite horror comedy of all time. It's just great. So that's it for the Frankenstein series. And then, of course, there's also The Mummy, which also has Boris Karloff as Imhotep. And he's not like the bandaged, really slowly lumbering mummy either, like people seem to think. He's like kind of a really creepy sorcerer type. He talks, he wears normal clothes, and he's kind of like a warlock. He has powers, and he's really intimidating. Yeah, Boris Karloff's always great, and this is one of my favorite performances of his, aside from Frankenstein's monster, of course. Yeah, Edward Dan Sloan is also in it. He was also in Dracula as Van Helsing, and he was in the first Frankenstein as well. And he's been in a couple other Universal monster movies. But yeah, very, very good movie. Some people will say it's really slow-paced and really dated, but maybe so. Maybe it's not as entertaining as, the 1999 version with Brendan Fraser, but it's a very, very good movie, very creepy and atmospheric, and Boris Karloff is just a fantastic villain. Yeah, this is 1932. It never really did get a proper sequel. It was followed by 4 other movies with the Mummy title, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, and The Mummy's Curse, featuring a different mummy, Karis, played by Tom Tyler in The Mummy's Hand, and then Lon Chaney Jr. in the other 3. Lon Chaney Jr. played Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, The Mummy, Karis, and Of course, The Wolfman, Lawrence Talbot. Yeah, great movie. This is also in the original packaging. A lot of these I ordered later. My original collection got destroyed when my mom's basement flooded several years ago, and I switched to shortly after I switched to DVD. I had them in a box in the basement. I hadn't unpacked them yet, and most of them got destroyed. But I salvaged some of them. This is one that I ordered later on. But I did have this, and I had all the other Mummy movies as well. I don't have those now, unfortunately. But yeah, very good movie. I highly recommend it. Yeah, there he is, our man, Boris Karloff. Then, of course, there's a Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr.'s Lawrence Talbot. Really good movie. Really cool makeup effects. I love it's a really cool looking werewolf. I still think it's one of the best. The transformation sequences are pretty good. They don't really show him turn into a werewolf like from his face. You just see his legs become wolf-like, all hairy and claws and stuff. But yeah, really cool movie, really creepy. Bela Lugosi's in it too. He plays the werewolf that bites Lon Chaney Jr.'s character, Lawrence Talbot, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I love this movie. It's one of my favorites, too. Yeah, very cool. And all the sequels, all the other movies featuring the Wolfman are all crossovers, part of the Frankenstein series. So he never did get another solo film, but that's fine. And he played the character every time, which is cool, because Dracula and Frankenstein's monster were played by different actors, multiple different performers throughout the series. So yeah, I did have a lot more of these back in the day. I did have Dracula's Daughter and Son of Dracula, and like I said, the rest of the Mummy movies and a few others. But yeah, I don't have all those anymore. But I did order them later on, and like I said, some of them are still in the original packaging, which is funny. Yeah, then there's also Creature from the Black Lagoon. I always liked this. This is one of my favorites growing up. This came out in 1954, so this was after like the Frankenstein series had already included with Abbott and Costello made Frankenstein from 1948. Yeah, very cool costume. The creature looks great. The Gill Man or whatever. There's a sequel, Revenge of the Creature, and then The Creature Walks Among Us, where he actually develops lungs and walks on land. He actually lives on among the humans and on out of the water most of the movie, which is pretty cool. Yeah, no, I always like these a lot. Yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon, good stuff. And then there's also Phantom of the Opera. Some people don't count this, but it was distributed by Universal Pictures, and it's a silent film from 1925. Lon Chaney Sr., of course, plays the Phantom. He's always great. He was also in Hunchback of Notre Dame and the Lost film, London After Midnight, which looks really cool. He always did his own makeup, too. And that's actually pretty creepy looking. It's very close to the original book, too. The book describes him as having like a skull-like face. Which is cool. Yeah, he did his own makeup. Yeah, silent film, and I really like it. It's really creepy, and I think it's one of the best adaptations of the novel by far. I think it's better than the Claude Rains film from 1943. He just had kind of a minor scar. He didn't look as terrifying as that. Yeah, one of my favorite silent films, right there with Nosferatu and Cabinet Dr. Caligari. Again, I don't know if it counts as a Universal Classic Monster movie, but I definitely count it. Yeah, then most of my collection originally back in the day looked like this. This is the original tape I had from Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. I wasn't able to salvage many of them. Many of them got destroyed. I don't even know if this will play if I put it in my VCR, because it probably has mold in there or something. Hopefully not. It doesn't look like it does, but yeah. Yeah, this is from 1990, it looks like. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, one of the first collections I ever had was the Frankenstein movies and most of the other Universal classics. So yeah. Another copy of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, one of the only remaining survivors of my original collection. Then I have a couple other tapes of Frankenstein and the Mummy. So, yeah, I already talked about those. So, and then of course there's also Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff. This isn't really part of the Universal series, but it does have Abbott and Costello, who met up with several of the other monsters from the Universal series, which we'll get to in a minute. And Boris Karloff's in it, of course, so I figured I had to talk about it, just in case. Not really part of the Universal Classic Monsters collection, but I figured I would show it here just in case. Alright, so I think that's it for VHS tapes. Now let's move on to DVDs. So we have Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, my favorite. I love Colin Clive and Ernest Thesiger in that movie. And, of course, Boris Karloff and Elsa Lanchester, even though she's not in it much. The Mummy, 1932, the original, and still the best. Yeah, Boris Karloff's great. He's creepy as hell and very menacing. And The Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr.'s, Lawrence Talbot's. Great werewolf movie, right up there with American Werewolf in London, The Howling, and Silver Bullet. It's probably the first werewolf movie I ever saw. I also used to have Werewolf in London in my original collection as well. And also had the Invisible Man movies. I guess I don't have those anymore. I could have sworn I had those still, but I'm not seeing them here. Okay, well, if I do have an Invisible Man, it's somewhere else, because it's not here with these others, so, but I definitely had it back in the day, but anyway, that's okay. Yeah, and then, okay, yeah, so, yeah, these were already looked at, and then, Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954, great movie, and, Phantom of the Opera. This is the Claude Rains version from 1943. And it's actually in color, I believe. Yeah, it's in color. It's one of the only Universal Classic Monster movies to be in color. I don't like it quite as much as the Lon Chaney Sr. version, the silent film from 1925, which I already talked about. But it's pretty good. I like Claude Rains. He also played the Invisible Man in the first Invisible Man movie. And Lawrence Talbot's father in The Wolfman, so he was no stranger to the Universal Classic Monster films. Yeah, good movie. And yeah, it's in color, which is pretty cool. But I don't like the makeup quite as good. He wears the mask for most of the movie, but I don't like the makeup quite as good as the Lon Chaney Sr. version. And then, of course, we have Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. Yeah, they met up with Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, and the Wolfman in this one. Very fun movie. And like I said, Bela Lugosi reprised as well as Dracula. Glenn Strange plays the monster for the third and final time, and Lawrence Talbot. Lon Chaney Jr. returns as Lawrence Talbot. Yeah, very funny movie. It cracks me up every time. And then, yeah, I think Costello Meet the Mummy. I think this was the last, considered the last, like, Universal Monsters movie. Well, it came out in 1955, and I think Creature Walks Among Us came out in 1956, so maybe that was the last. This is like the one before that. It is one of the last. I think it's the last time Abbott and Costello met a Universal monster. Yeah, pretty funny movie. Not quite as good as Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but it's not bad. It's pretty funny. I really like the part where Costello starts beating the mummy with a shovel, not realizing that it's not the actual mummy. The mummy's renamed Clarice in this movie. He's not Caris anymore, he's Clarice. He's kind of a different backstory, so I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to be the same mummy, but it's usually played for laughs. It's not really supposed to be taken seriously. But yeah, and then there's Abbott and Costello Meet the Monsters collection. This has Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. That's a really funny movie. Abbott and Costello meets Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde wasn't really technically part of the Universal Classic Monsters. There was a movie done by Paramount that came out around that same time. That was black and white and stuff. There's a few different adaptations that came out around that time, but none of them were technically a Universal movie, so I'm not including them here. Even though Abbott and Costello did meet them. Then Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, like I just talked about. Yeah, 4 very funny movies. I love those guys. They're just hilarious, and their interactions with the monsters are just a blast. Yeah, great movie, and great movies. And I think that does it for those DVDs. Then I have these box sets. Yeah, Dracula, featuring the original 1931 classic, Dracula's Daughter, which is a great movie, very underrated. Edward Van Sloan returns as Van Helsing, renamed Von Helsing for some reason. Then there's Son of Dracula, where Lon Chaney Jr. plays Dracula, even though it's called Son of Dracula. I'm pretty sure he's just supposed to be Dracula. Then there's also House of Dracula on here, which was, a crossover with, the Frankenstein series. Frankenstein's monster and the Wolfman are in it, but I already talked about that. Dr. Edelman's like a Jekyll Hyde creature. Yeah, so, yeah, this collection's a must-have. And then, of course, Frankenstein. Yeah, it's got Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, Ghost of Frankenstein, and House of Frankenstein. It doesn't have Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which is odd, but still, for a while, this is the only way I had all of these on a format other than VHS, because they didn't release them separately, and most of them they didn't get released separately and on DVD until later. They had like double features with Son of Frankenstein and Ghost of Frankenstein on one DVD and all that. In The Mummy, it's got the Boris Karloff original with Imhotep, the evil mummy who talks and wears clothes and interacts with people. Then it's got the other 4, the Mummy's Hand, Mummy's Tomb, the Mummy's Ghost, the Mummy's Curse, with Caris, the mummy who actually is in bandages and walks around, stumbling and doesn't speak. And he's kind of like a slasher villain, like a proto-slasher villain, years before that even became a thing, which is kind of cool. And yeah, Tom Tyler plays him the first time we see Caris, and then Lon Chaney Jr. plays him the next 3 times. And for the record, Eddie Parker plays him in Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, even though he's renamed Clarice. Eddie Parker did the stunt work for a lot of these guys. A lot of these famous actors are part of the Universal Monster series. Then there's the Wolfman. Oh! It's got the Wolfman, the original Wolfman. It's got Werewolf of London and She-Wolf of London, which came out in 1946. They're not really part of the same series. It doesn't feature the Lawrence Talbot Wolfman character. It's just different werewolf movies made by Universal, but they're pretty, they're definitely worth watching. Then, of course, Creature in the Black Lagoon, which features the trilogy, all 3 films, and then The Invisible Man, which has the original from 1933 with Claude Rains, and the sequels. Invisible Man Returns was Vincent Price, one of his first horror roles. The Invisible Woman, Invisible Agent, and The Invisible Man's Revenge. So, yeah, these are cool. Great special effects for the time, too. Yeah, these are awesome. I love these. And then finally, we have the Blu-rays, and I just got this recently, the Universal Classic Monsters Complete 30-Film Collection. Yeah, very happy to have this. Yeah, and these are all the monsters. These are all the people that I count as Universal Classic Monsters. So you have Jekyll Hyde and Hunchback of Notre Dame, and all those don't really count, at least not in my opinion. But yeah, they're cool too. But yeah, these are the only guys that I'm talking about in this video, because if I included every Universal horror movie or monster movie, I'd be here all day. Yeah, it includes all those. It does have the 3 Abbott and Costello movies, not Jekyll and Hyde, because it's not even a Universal monster, but it does have Meet Frankenstein, Meet the Mummy, and Meet the Invisible Man. Yeah, it's all 3. Creature of the Black Lagoon has all the Frankensteins, all the Draculas, all the Wolfmans, all the Mummies, all the Invisible Man. It has the 1943 Phantom of the Opera with Claude Rains. It doesn't have the original 1925 silent film with Lon Chaney Sr., but yeah, pretty cool anyway. Yeah. Yep, very happy to have this. Comes with the booklet too. The original House of Horror. Yeah, talking all about the Universal Monster movies. Yeah, really cool stuff. This is a must-have. It cost me it was about $120, which I think is worth it. You know, I think it's a wise purchase, money well spent. Had to have these because they're the ones that started it all, at least for me, you know. As I said, I probably still would have been a horror fan, but this accelerated the process. So yeah, Universal Classic Monsters. Yeah, we got Dracula, the Complete Legacy Collection, and this actually has Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein and House of Frankenstein, even though they weren't on the other Dracula Legacy Collection on DVD that I already showed. Yeah, and then Frankenstein. It's got Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein again. It's also in this version too, and yeah, it's got all 8 of them, all 8 movies featuring Frankenstein's monster. The Mummy, featuring all 6 Mummy movies. The original with Boris Karloff, the 4 with Karras, and then Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, which I already talked about. Yep. I think it's funny, Frankenstein, the original 1931 version, I have more than any other movie. I've got a Betamax, 2 DVDs, 2 VHS tapes, and a Blu-ray. So I've got 6 different copies of that movie. I probably have it more than any other movie. It's right up there with Halloween 2 for as many copies. Yeah, the Wolfman, which also, again, has the Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein. Yeah, all the crossover movies, and also has Werewolf of London and She-Wolf of London, just like the DVD version does. Yeah. Yep. Then, yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon has all 3 movies. The Invisible Man has all 6 movies, including the Abbott and Costello one. Yeah, the original 1933 one with Claude Rains is the best. Oh man, I'm dropping the DVDs all over the place. And Phantom of the Opera, which is it's just the Claude Rains version from 1943. It doesn't have the Lon Chaney Sr. one. Yeah, and it's in color, like I said. But still pretty cool. Very happy to have these. Because, you know, they started it all, and I'll continue to watch them always and forever. Love these movies. Love these classic monsters. They hold a special place in my heart. I'll always be a fan. And my legacy as a horror fan, it all started here. It all started with these guys. Before I got into Hammer. Hammer was the next step, and my next video will definitely be related to Hammer horror. All about Hammer horror, so stay tuned for that. Alright guys, yeah, so what do you think of the Universal Classic Monsters? Which of these do you own? Leave your answers in the comments below, or better yet, make a video showing your Universal Classic Monsters collection, or just want to discuss them with me in the comments. Great movies. And always be a fan. Alright guys, thank you for watching. I'm Hellhound. This has been the Late Night Spook Show here on the Horror Metal channel. Until next time. Later.